All right, we'll go ahead and get started. If anybody else trickles in, we will welcome them when they get here. Very glad to have everybody here. This is the Strategic Mastery and Operational Excellence webinar hosted by Assured Strategy. This is part of our Assured Strategy webinar series where we are teaching business leaders what we know about business growth. And we're so excited to have you all here with us today. Those of you that are watching live or those of you that are watching on the recording after the fact. If you are here live, feel free to drop any questions in the chat or comments. Feel free to be interactive. You won't interrupt me. We're doing just fine here and happy to have you interact. So speaking of me, who am I? I am Ted Sarvata. I've been with Assured Strategy for 7 years, and I have been a strategy coach since 2010. And Assured Strategy is a business strategy firm. It's right there in our name that we think about strategy first. And what we do is think about how else do people need to be improving their businesses in order to make strategy really work. So today's webinar in particular is about the connection between strategy and operational excellence. But everything we do connects people, strategy, execution, and cash. These are 4 decisions that you have to get right. These come out of the book Scaling Up, which is the second version of Vern Harnish's book Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And it's been used by tens of thousands of businesses all over the world, entrepreneurs, to help them build their business. And so we work in all 4 of these areas. Sometimes we start in one of these areas. We end up working in all of them eventually. Whether we start with strategy or not really depends on the situation of a business at a particular time. All right. So we're going to get into strategy today, right? We obviously have to understand what is strategy. But before we do that, I want to think about Southwest Airlines as an example and think about what is their one phrase strategy. Some of you may have heard about this. You may have read about this. You may have experienced this if you're a Southwest customer. So if you think you know the answer, go ahead and drop it in the chat. Wrong answers are perfectly acceptable. So bring your thoughts. What is Southwest Airlines' one phrase strategy? I'll give it a few seconds for people to respond and think about it. For those of you outside the US, you may have heard about Southwest. You may not have flown Southwest, but Southwest Airlines is a low-cost airline, and they really have broken the mold of what it means to be an airline in the United States. And we're going to talk more about them and what the specifics are. Their one phrase strategy is wheels up. They know that an airplane in the air makes money, whereas an airplane on the ground doesn't. And they have made all kinds of trade-offs, and we're going to understand what that is today. We're going to study Southwest a little bit and understand all the details that go into how we make wheels up possible. IKEA is another great example. What is their one phrase strategy? You may have shopped in an IKEA. You may know about IKEA. What is IKEA's one phrase strategy? Give you a couple seconds to think about it. Drop it in the chat if you think you might know, or if you think you have a guess. Their strategy is flat pack furniture. Think about all the implications of that. They don't ship air. It's all flat pack. It makes their whole business model work. And we're going to get into the details to look at some of how that works when we get there. All right, I want to share an example of a company I'm not going to share the name of. They are ice cream manufacturer, small batch ice cream manufacturer, and they have their own retail shops. And their one phrase strategy is be local everywhere. And we'll talk about what that means. But think about the implications, right? Normally when we think of a chain, or we think of someplace that franchises or they get big, think about McDonald's, right? Every McDonald's is pretty much the same. They might have slight layout differences when you walk in the store, but the food is the same. The cleanliness of the bathrooms are the same. Pretty much the way they treat you is the same. But this particular ice cream company that we're going to talk about, they are local everywhere they go. So they feel unique in each place. All right, so let's talk about what is strategy. Jack Welch, long-standing famous CEO of GE, what he said is that strategy is not a lengthy action plan. It's the evolution of a central idea through continually changing circumstances. Our founder and CEO at Assured Strategy, David Chavez, he took this Jack Welch quote and he gave a little nuance to it himself. He says, don't fall in love with your path. Fall in love with the destination. That's one way to look at strategy. If you know what your destination is, you will change your path as needed to get there. right? Their path is just a path. You can take another path. As long as you're going to the destination, the path that you're on doesn't really matter. If there's an avalanche, if there's an earthquake, if there's a mudslide, for those of you in California, I'm sorry that you might be dealing with that right now. But if there's something in your way, you don't let that stop you from getting to the destination. And that is one way to look at strategy. All right. Michael Porter is the thought leader we look to as the one who's got the best definition of strategy that we really like. So we use this all the time. Strategy begins with a unique and valuable position. Unique and valuable. If there were only one unique and valuable position in any marketplace, then every company that you ever dealt with would look the same. They would all have the same strategy. But there are multiple unique and valuable positions in every marketplace, and you have to look and find one. How do you know that it's valuable? Well, your customers tell you by giving you their money. When they give you money, they tell you that your position that you have staked out is unique and valuable. Valuable anyway, maybe not unique. There are plenty of industries where people are competing on the same dimensions with each other and they're not actually being unique. But we're going to look at how do you make a strategy that gives you some uniqueness. All right. Strategy involves trade-offs. By definition, you can't be everything to everyone. You can't serve every kind of customer. You can't meet all needs. You have to trade off. Think about Southwest and the trade-offs, right? Last time you flew Southwest, how was your meal? That's right, they don't serve meals. That was a trade-off, and we're going to talk about many more of their trade-offs when we get there. The third element of strategy is creating fit. The various activities that you choose have to fit with one another. And again, we will talk more in detail in just a moment when we get into the details of the Southwest story and the IKEA story and my ice cream company story. We're going to talk about the fit between the various activities. Bags fly free on Southwest Airlines is not just a random marketing exercise, and it's not just a money giveaway to their customers. It fits with this idea that airplanes in the air make money and airplanes on the ground don't. So if you have bags fly free, it means people check their bags in advance, and we don't spend as much time loading the airplane and struggling with the overhead bins. All right, and we're going to get into where the fit is between a whole bunch of their other activities when we get there. For the purpose of today, it's really important that everybody understands that strategy is not operational effectiveness. Operational effectiveness is very important. It's very essential. And I would say operational effectiveness is one way to pay for the trade-offs that you have to make in order to be great at just a few things, because everything's got to be paid for, right? And when you make trade-offs, you've got to pay for things. And so operational effectiveness, efficiency, will be where you gain the resources that you're going to put into building that unique and valuable position. So in this Porter model, and by the way, if you want to know more about Michael Porter or where these ideas come from, the 1996 HBR article, What is Strategy, is your resource. And I'll refer to that a few more times throughout today's webinar. So Michael Porter, if you're thinking this way about a unique and valuable position with fits and trade-offs, what do you think about competition? Do you compete to be the best? Or, on the other hand, do you compete to be unique? Most people, when they think about competition, you think about competing to be the best. We often, in business, we make sports analogies. Well, in sports, you are competing to be the best because you know there's one winner. At the end of that season, there is one winner, and you need to compete to be the best. You may have a different playing style. You may be unique on the field or on the court, but ultimately, you're competing to be the best. But in business, we need to compete to be unique. We can have two or more competitors in the same industry, all making money, all with happy customers, and all with increasing margin if they're all working to be unique and they're moving away from each other. Now, most of the examples we don't have multiple competitors attempting to actually be unique in a particular industry. We have one that's unique, and we have most that are mostly same. But that is not the recipe for greatness. Competing to be the best is not the recipe for greatness because others are simply going to follow you, and you can't be great at everything. So you have to pick and choose which dimensions that you choose to be great on and which ones you choose to be really terrible at. Actually, to be great at certain things means to be terrible at others. So let's go back to our Ice cream company, IKEA, and Southwest. When we think about competing to be unique, all three of them act differently in their marketplace. The idea of being the best ice cream company really doesn't even make any sense. But what does it mean in their case? They are trying to serve their customers really well. They're very expensive. I can buy less expensive ice cream. You can stand in a line around the block in Portland, Oregon, in the rain in January to go into this ice cream shop. Why would you do that? Because there's something about it. Who are they serving? They're serving foodies. They're serving people that want to be hip and in the know and connected to the new happening thing. And that's part of their marketing. It's part of the ethos that they have created, and people want to go there. They tell stories about people who have met their future spouses in line waiting for ice cream at these ice cream shops. It's really fascinating. IKEA, they're unique. They're not the same as other furniture stores. They don't tell you how convenient it is to shop at IKEA. They tell you, bring your walking shoes and you're going to be here all day. We'll take your kids and we'll give you Swedish meatballs. That's part of their trade-off, right? And Southwest Airlines is unique in the airline industry. They don't care that people complain about the fact that you can't get advanced seating on their airline. And they don't care that they don't do baggage transfer to other airlines, and they get complaints about that sometimes. That would break their business model to try to be everything to everyone. So they're competing to be unique. Now, I just want to give you a little bit more about strategic analysis and how it connects to execution. Most of this slide we are not going to get into today, just in interest of time. But if you're interested in any of these other items on this slide, let me know after the fact, or you can write to info@assuredstrategy.com, and we are happy to talk with you about this. So in order to create your strategy, you need to do two kinds of analysis. You need to have external analysis, industry analysis. You need to know what's going on out there with your customers, with your competitors, and what the needs and the wants are out there in the world. And you also have to do internal analysis. You have to look at what your strengths and capabilities are, and you have to know your customer data and know what it is that they care about, right? So those two kinds of data are the inputs into strategic evaluation. Strategic evaluation is that process of figuring out who is my core customer and what is my brand promise and what do people really care about, right? Really understanding the marketplace and where we fit. And from there comes your strategy. And you can think about strategy as a combination of scope and positioning and stance and fit and logic. All of that feeds back into the analysis and you keep going. Strategy is never done. Hear me very clearly on this point. Your strategy is never done. It's always a work in progress. So keep that in mind. From your strategy then comes your execution. In order for you to get things done in the world, you have to be matching up with your strategy. Now, your strategy might be a future strategy that's going to take you 3 years to build. That's fine. When you get there and you're executing, well, you need to then feed that back and evolve your strategy over time. All right. And you're going to do the same thing with your execution. You're going to feed that back into your analysis and you're going to evolve over time. All right, so we mentioned people, strategy, execution, and cash. And we mentioned the one phrase strategies of some of these companies that we're going to use as examples today. So now I want to get into execution and how the activities actually fit together and how you make them real in your company. When you execute well, this is what it looks like, metaphorically, right? These pilots are highly, highly trained and they know the objective, they know what they're up there to do, and they each know their own job very well. They also know the jobs of the others around them. Nobody's micromanaging each other, by the way. They are just each holding each other accountable for doing what each one needs to be doing, right? And they trust each other, high levels of trust. We could talk all day just about this slide, but we're not going to do that. We're going to get into some details now of the Southwest Airlines example, and we'll do the same with IKEA. We're going to do the same with our ice cream company. So think about Southwest. We talked about how the activities need to fit and there have to be trade-offs and you have to have a unique and valuable position. So frequent reliable departures, limited passenger service. This was written, by the way, in 1996. So some of this may not be 100% accurate today, but you can still see the DNA of Southwest today. Many of these things are still very true. But look here, short haul point-to-point routes between mid-sized cities and secondary airports. That's not been true for a long time for Southwest. That was true in their origins, and it was still true in 1996. But very low ticket prices, high aircraft utilization, lean, highly productive ground and gate crews, frequent reliable departures. They have some notable exceptions to that we've seen in the news a year ago with the holiday meltdown and those kinds of things, and then limited passenger service. All these are still true, except for the short haul and mid-sized airports and that kind of thing. But then look at all the detailed activities and how they fit together. Limited use of travel agents. Of course, we don't have travel agents anymore, but back then this was a big deal for them. Automatic ticket machine, 1996 automatic ticket machines. Now everybody does that. So everybody has followed them. They've followed them only on certain activities. They haven't followed them on the whole scope of all the activities. 15-minute gate turnarounds. I don't think they can do 15 anymore, but they're usually between 20 and 30, which is amazing because most other airlines, they have you board the plane 45 minutes before you leave. On a lot of other airlines. Southwest, they have you board 30 minutes before. And if an airplane lands, inside that 30 minutes, they're still working hard to get you out on time. No seat assignments, no meals, high compensation of employees. The flight attendants are the ones cleaning the plane. When you get off a Southwest plane, you have to say, excuse me, and get around the flight attendants because they're cleaning the plane. They're not waiting for another crew to come in and do the cleaning of that plane. But high compensation for employees and flexible union contracts are what enables that to happen. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you'll see the pilots out there loading the bags because they know getting off the ground is the most important thing. And they have to have everybody's bags or they're going to have low customer satisfaction. So they've got to do both. High level of employee stock ownership. And then Southwest, the low-fare airline, they branded that way. And then this idea that they only have 737s. That hasn't always been the case. When they bought AirTran Airlines, they had some other kinds of airplanes, but they sold those off over time, and they've gotten back to the 737. All right, so this is really important, how all these activities fit together and they make the whole strategy work. Wheels up is the most important thing for Southwest. All right, if you have any comments or questions about any of that, please put them in the chat. Remember, this is from the 1996 article in HBR, What is Strategy? That's the Harvard Business Review. All right, let's move on to IKEA. They have completely turned the furniture business upside down. And here we are, right? 1996 was 27 years ago, but they still hold the same position. Limited customer service, self-selection by customers, low manufacturing cost, and modular furniture design. Those are their differentiators. And then you look at all the things that go into making that happen. So limited customer service plus modular furniture design, that adds up to self-assembly by customers. And ease of transport and assembly. Ease of transport for them and ease of transport for you. You can throw it on top of your car, use their twine and you get it home. You don't need to then hire a delivery company and you build it yourself. Now, you're going to bleed by the end of that process, but that's part of the experience. So if you're their core customer, you're happy with that. And if you're not their core customer, that repels you and you're fine. You're fine and they're fine. Okay. Knockdown kit. I don't know what knockdown kit packaging is. Actually, we're going to move on. Wide variety with ease of manufacturing, right? Self-transport by customers, explanatory catalogs, suburban locations with ample parking. You don't typically see, at least in 1996, you didn't see it at all. I don't know if you see it today, but you don't see it in urban areas, downtown. You saw it on the outskirts, right? You got to drive out there to get there. High traffic store layout. That's the maze, right? You're a rat in the maze. It's really hard to walk into IKEA and just get one thing because you can't even find the thing you're looking for because you got to go through the whole maze, right? And at the end of the maze, that's where you get those Swedish meatballs. So you're going to get a lot more impulse buying. Most items are in inventory. They don't have to order things for you typically. That's the model. Most other furniture stores, you walk in that place, you have a customer service person on you right away. Can I help you? Can I help you? What are you looking for? They've only got 3 or 4 of each thing, and they're going to give you a catalog of the materials, and then it's going to take 6 weeks for them to build it, and they have to ship it to your house, which means you got to take the day off work, and you've got to be there when they show up, and then they're going to, somebody's going to deliver it. You got to pay for that too. So it's a whole different experience. IKEA has completely turned the whole industry on its head. Year-round stocking, 100% sourcing from long-term suppliers, so that way they don't have to turn over their catalog if they don't have availability of that product. So you can see how these activities all fit together. Okay, moving on from IKEA. Our ice cream company, their strategy, be local everywhere. What does that mean? It means they don't ship ice cream and they don't ship ingredients for ice cream. They have a kitchen in every market and they have a different chocolate supplier in every market, and they have a different salt supplier in every market, and a different dairy in every market. And they promote those suppliers. So, for example, in the Portland, Oregon market, they buy from a particular salt company, which is known in foodie circles, and those people that know that kind of salt, they are attracted to this ice cream. Right? Does that make sense? And then they have a different salt in a different market because there's a different, foodie salt that people know about in that market. And so they're able to play off these relationships and appear local in every different market. And the chocolatier, same thing. They promote their suppliers, and it's really important. They also have collaborations with local chefs in each market. And the reason that's important for an ice cream company, especially this ice cream company, which I've never seen any other ice cream company anywhere do this, no matter how unique they are in their own niche, they come out with new flavors every single month. And that way they're able to do a marketing push every single month, and they're able to get a lot of repeat traffic in their store 12 months a year because people want to come in at the beginning of the month to see what is new this month. And then they also have flavors that are there all the time. They have local PR, local public relations in every market. They do not emphasize their national reach. That's not part of how they advertise themselves or how they think of themselves. They don't talk about how many states they're in or how many markets they're in. They talk about being local in that place and how unique a particular location is. They opened where I live in Vancouver, Washington, just recently, and when I read the story in the local newspaper, all it talked about was how great that location was. And the quotes from the CEO were just about how great that location is. And I've been now to that location, and it is great. It's a great location to walk around, and the store itself is unique, and it's different from all their other stores. The staff are also highly trained to talk customers through all those ingredients. The reason that I know the story of that chocolatier and that salt is because when you go in there, they ask you to sample anything you want. The experience, even if you've been waiting in the rain in January in Portland, Oregon, and it's cold, you think about how much time they take to be with you. It's really astounding. They talk through the ingredients, and they built different stations where they have all the different flavors. So most ice cream companies, every flavor is just in one spot, and the scooper has to go to all these different spots. But at this ice cream store, they've got 4 different freezers, and that means that 4 different scoopers can be serving 4 different groups of customers all at the same time without anybody having to move around, and everybody can sample everything they want. And they even have a little chute where you put the spoon that you did the sampling, and you just put it right in there, and then they're able to go straight into the dishwashing, or I don't know where the bin goes. But it's incredible. Over the years, they have built up all these different details. The details really matter, and that's what I want to emphasize today. When we're thinking about strategic mastery and operational excellence, the details, the strategy comes out in the details of the execution. That's how it becomes real for your customers. That's the thing that is really super important, and I just cannot overemphasize that enough. And this is true. All of the examples that we've shared here today are business to consumer businesses. But if you are a business to business business, it's the same thing, because your customers are people. You have people and they have people. And so the activities, the way you provide your service or your product really matters. So I cannot overemphasize that enough. The details matter, and how these different activities fit together really, really matters. And so I want you to do that analysis for your own business as a result of being here today. All right, very good. So how do you make this real when you've got an idea and it's out there in the future? So I want to use this metaphor of the meadow and the valley, right? And then the mountains off in the distance. So we're not going to get into details today about what a BHAG is. You probably have a BHAG in your business. If you don't, I highly recommend you look into that. A big, hairy, audacious goal. Jim Collins coined that term. And it's your long-term goal. It's 10 to 30 years, and it calls on you to greatness. So the idea that you can fall in love with your destination and not your path that we talked about earlier, that's the BHAG. And then what you do is you say, well, where do we need to be in 3 years? What are our 3-year thrusts or our 3-year targets? Where do we need to be? We guess. Where do we think we need to be? We need to be out on that mountain, that base camp in the green box here, right? Take a look out here. So we make a guess where we think we need to be in order to get to the BHAG, the 10-year goal or the 30-year goal that goes out further. We know what we think those 3 years are, because that's how we're going to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. So ultimately, those could be your differentiators, those 3-year targets. And then you break that down further. You break down your 3-year target into your 1-year target, and you break down your 1-year goal, you break it down into 90 days. And every quarter, you reset and you say, all right, here's our BHAG, here's our 3-year, here's our 1-year, this is what we need to do this quarter. You cannot lay out quarter 1, 2, 3, 4 and just expect it going to go lockstep, because you're building something unique in the marketplace. You're building, by definition, on the unknowns, because these are your differentiators. You're working on making the differentiators better. So every 90 days, you need to do a reset. And if you need details on that, or you need to talk about that further, you can get in touch with me afterwards. You can write to me, info@assuredstrategy.com. I'll put that up at the end. But the whole idea here is every 90 days, and then every year, you're doing a reset. And you're making sure you're validating your BHAG. It still makes sense to you. You're still working towards it. You cannot project plan a BHAG. A BHAG is not a BHAG, really, if you can say, well, by the end of next year, we'll be here, and then the next year we'll be there, and the next year will be. If you can plan it out like 10 years or 15 years, there's too many unknowns in this world. That's not a BHAG. A BHAG has to be big enough that it makes you a little bit tense in your stomach. You get a little frightened about that because you don't know how to get there. But here's where we think we need to be in 3 years, and then you're reevaluating every single year. Okay? Now, why am I telling you all this? Because I want to show you how this works in another real world example. So a company I worked with in Michigan, they were a cloud hosting provider. This was in like 2011. This was before every cloud hosting provider had very high levels of physical security. They focused at the time on banks and healthcare. So banks and healthcare, both highly regulated, and the privacy of their customers was super important. And so they were in the state of Michigan in the United States, and almost all of their customers were in the state of Michigan. And the reason for that is because those customers wanted the physical experience. They wanted to walk into the data center and see the eye scan and the hand scan and all the security that you went through to get into those. They wanted to see it. They wanted to feel it. They wanted to experience it. So it was really important for them. They knew that in order to grow, they had to move outside of just the Michigan market, because you can only have a certain number of people that were, a certain number of banks and a certain number of healthcare organizations. So in order to go into another market, they also knew that if they can crack that code, if they can successfully enter a second market, they had a list of like 50 markets, the top 50 markets in the United States. If they can successfully go into a second market, then investors will be happy to throw money at them to be able to do market number 3 and number 4 and number 5 and the whole list of 50. They should be able to do them all, but they have to be able to go from 1 to 2. The second market was really critical for them. So what did they do? They created a 3-year thrust that said, be a player in a second market. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, Ted, that's pretty vague. Be a player in a second market. What the heck does that mean? 1 second, I'll tell you. It is vague. It's not a SMART goal. We'll talk about SMART goals in a minute, right? Your shorter term goals need to be SMART goals. Be a player in a second market really worked for them because they had this list of 50 markets. They knew that depending on which market they choose, the definition of player is going to be different, right? So they're in Michigan. If they're going to go into Chicago, then being a player, it might be their top 10. But if they're going to go into Madison, Wisconsin, they might need to be top 3 to be a player. And so they didn't want to overspecify what it means to be a player, because they didn't want to hem themselves in. They wanted to give themselves flexibility. And be a player in a second market doesn't imply they choose a particular second market. Obviously, they had to choose. But in the 3-year, in their strategy, they didn't have to choose yet. When they get to execution, now they have to choose. Okay, you see what I'm saying here? The strategy is be a player in a second market. That allows them, once they're successful at doing that, that allows them to raise as much money as they need for markets number 3, 4, 5, because they can show their profitability. So now that's the strategy, be a player in a second market. Now you shift over out of the 3-year, you shift over to the 1-year, and you say, all right, what decisions do we need to make now? Well, they needed to choose the market. And they needed to decide whether they were going to build a data center or buy a data center, or whether they were going to innovate in their business model and the way they sell. And that's ultimately what they chose. They chose Dayton, Ohio, because you could serve Columbus, Ohio, and Indianapolis, both, right? A pretty easy driving distance, and they could replicate the model. But they also, what they did was they hired a new sales manager in Dayton, and they attempted to sell their Michigan data center space remotely, even though people wouldn't drive to the Michigan data centers. They could, it wasn't that far, but it was too far for a customer to want to go see that stuff. But the innovation was they're going to try to break that connection between the physical security and having to see it face to face. And they were going to attempt to do that. But it was close enough to home that the executives and the other staff of this company could drive from Michigan to Dayton pretty easily. So they weren't going to go off to California or Utah or somewhere else, right? They wanted to be relatively close. So that's what they decided. And they hired that sales manager. And what happened 3 months later? A data center came on the market, an existing data center in Dayton, Ohio. It came on the market. It wasn't on their plan, but it fit into their annual plan and it fit into their 3-year plan. And so they bought it. They didn't have to do a lot of deep analysis about whether this was the right thing to do. Obviously, they needed to run the financials on that particular data center and make sure that the price was right and that kind of thing. But they didn't have a strategic question in their mind. They already knew that it matched their strategy. You following me? The big picture didn't change, even though the details changed. This is another example of don't fall in love with your path. Fall in love with the destination. For them, the destination was that 50, the list of 50, the list of 50 markets. So going into that second market was the first step. And no matter how they got there, they could change their mind about what was the right path. And that's what they did. All right. Now, I want to go back to the ice cream company for a few more examples about how you make this real. And I want you to think about what it was like for them, right? They started in one of the co-founders' kitchens and they had a food truck. And then they opened shop number 1. And so the goal of that first year was open shop number 1. And the second year, the goal was open shop number 2. By the time they got to the 3rd year, here's the really important point about execution. They were opening shop number 3. That is the activity they were doing, but they didn't write down open shop number 3. What did they write down? What they wrote down, write the shop opening guide. I'm just going to pause for a second. I want you to really think about what that means. They opened shop number 1. They were just thinking about shop number 1. When they opened shop number 2, they were just thinking about shop number 2. When they opened shop number 3, they were already in their minds thinking about shop number 4 and 5. And so they wrote the shop opening guide because they were thinking about how to replicate. Now, fast forward to today, their plan is to open 8 shops this year. So they have really come a long way from the time when they were able to open one a year. Now, take more baby steps from that. One of their annual goals at one point was write the market opening guide because they were moving out of their first city and they were moving into a second city. So immediately, as soon as they opened that first shop in the second location, they were writing the market opening guide and they were opening a kitchen in that new place. They didn't want to have to ship ice cream even from the very beginning. They knew what their strategy needed to be and they were going to execute on it right from the beginning. Now, there would have been nothing wrong with having to ship if something had gone wrong or if the supply chain hadn't been in place. They could have shipped for a while, but it would have been more expensive and it would have robbed resources from marketing and other things in that shop in that new market. So it actually made a really big difference that they were able to open that kitchen and therefore set the groundwork for making that second market really thrive. And since then, they've gone on to, I think they have 33 shops today. With the idea that they're opening, they've already opened 1 this year and there's 7 more. I mean, they're just going like gangbusters. All right, let me just look at my notes and see if there was anything else. I want to come back to this idea that the line could be around the block, but your scooper has all the time in the world. I want to come back to this because I think it's a really important point, a very detailed grassroots, like on the ground, boots on the ground, like what's happening in your business. They knew that financially, in order to improve the outcomes of the business, meaning the profitability, they needed to have more transactions per hour. If transactions per hour fell below a certain number, they knew they couldn't make money. And if they were above a certain amount, that's really when they were making profit. So you think about transactions per hour and you think about the contradiction of what that would look like for a customer if you felt rushed, right? Transactions per hour is not a customer-friendly metric. The customer does not necessarily want to be speeded along because their strategy, right, is to have you stand there and sample all their ice cream. They want you to believe and experience the local flavors of the different chefs and the different stories, and they want your scooper to spend as much time with you as you want. They literally have a sign on the wall now. This wasn't true back then, but now there's a sign on the wall that said, feel free to sample everything. That's part of their model. They want you to feel that connection. And so when they decided that improving transactions per hour was really important, they didn't tell anybody at the shops. They kept that to the central location, right? They kept that to the administrative people. They didn't tell the manager at the shop. They definitely didn't tell the scoopers because they wanted the scoopers to just do their job. And their job was telling stories and interacting and connecting with those customers. And so what did that mean? How on earth can you increase transactions per hour when you're not telling the people at the store to move faster? Interesting question, isn't it? When you ask a question like that and you find the contradictions or what look like contradictions or paradoxes in your own model, that's where you can really get power. In their case, I told you, now they have these 4 different stations. They didn't have that back then. They had the freezer arranged like every other ice cream company, and they had the scoopers, stumbling over each other as they had to switch places and they had to move customers along. Over time, they learned one way to increase transactions per hour. First of all, they increased number of cash registers. They went from 1 cash register to 2. That was an easy way to increase transactions per hour. But now they have these different stations. And in a shop that's bigger, they have more stations. And in a shop that's smaller, they have fewer stations. But either way, the station concept where they have inventory in each of those stations, it really makes a difference and it moves people along because you give everybody the feeling they are the only customer in the world. They're the only customer that matters at all. So you have this amazing feeling when you're there, and yet they're able to actually move the line very quickly. All right, all that makes sense? So I want you to really think about your business model and think about what your strategy is and what you're doing to make it real and how those activities are fitting with each other. One of the tools we use in our planning is the one-page strategic plan, originally from the book Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, now from the book Scaling Up. Here's the Scaling Up book if you've got one of these. I don't recommend reading this book cover to cover for most people. It is really dense and it's really hard to read, but it's an amazing reference book. If you want a quick way to get into these ideas, then read Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, and it'll really help you. The one-page strategic plan, though, I just want to show you how this works. So the gray part over here, this is the core. These are your core values and your core purpose. We haven't talked about that really at all, but if you are not clear on your core values and your core purpose, you're probably going to have a hard time with the rest of strategy. You really need to know who you are as a business. What do we exist for? That's our purpose. Why do we exist? And it's not making money. I'm fine with you making money. You need to make money or you'll be out of business, right? If you're not making at least a 5% profit every year, you are probably going out of business. 5 and 10%, you're going to make it. You're going to limp along, but 10% is really where you need to be. And if you're above 10%, awesome. That means you've really found a unique and valuable position. Anywhere between 10 and 15%, super strong. You should really aim to stay there. If you're above 15%, don't get used to it because the marketplace is going to claw that back from you. They're going to find ways to beat you up over that and take it back. There are exceptions. Look at Apple. Apple's profit is much higher. They have found a unique and valuable position in the marketplace. So that shows the power of what we're talking about today. All right, so these core concepts: purpose, core values. Core values is how you behave in your business. Very important for strategy. If you have to babysit your people and you have to make sure they're doing things the way you think they should be done, then you don't have a strong culture because you're not enabling people to just live their best life, and you're not hiring well. And so that's a whole nother webinar. We'll get into that another time. We've done that before, and we can do that again. You can come to one of our workshops, and we'll go deeper in that. All right, and then the blue part is the strategy part. That's where you have your 3-year thrust and capabilities. We've talked about that already. Your 3-year, we're not going to get, obviously you can't read this. It's much too small. But the point is, your strategy happens in blue, and then the yellow part is the execution. So this is the marriage between the long-term strategic thinking and then planning your execution. So I'm happy to send you this tool, and I'm happy to talk with you any further about anything that we've done today. Happy to do Q&A now. You can reach out for tools, info@assuredstrategy.com. If you'd like to ask a question, you can take yourself off mute and just ask it verbally, or you can type it in the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions. And while we're waiting for questions, this is part of the Assured Strategy webinar series. We have an upcoming webinar on March 11th of how to coach employees for top performance. April 4th, improving your cash position with 4 simple key financial levers. That's going to be a really great one. And then May 23rd, mastering efficiency, process-driven tactics for cost savings. If you'd like to see us in person, we are doing in-person all-day workshops in Phoenix, Austin, and Portland. In Phoenix on February 15th, just coming up in a week and a half, is Navigating Change. Get in touch with us right away for that one because it's just right around the corner. And then in Austin, we're doing a Scaling Up workshop in March. And then in May, we're doing another Scaling Up workshop in Portland. I'm leading that one in Portland, so I'd be happy to see you there. All right. Well, since we looked like we're done with our questions, we are going to call it a day. Thank you so much for coming. We will send you the tools if you reach out to us. And feel free to reach out to us if you want to talk about anything we've talked about today privately, or you'd like us to meet with your leadership team. We are happy to do that. Thank you all for coming. Take care. Have a great day.